Have you ever felt it? That prickling sensation on the back of your neck when you're the last one left at work. The hum of the vending machine suddenly too loud. The fluorescent lights flickering just a little too much. Maybe you tell yourself it's nothing, just the building settling, or your imagination running wild after a long shift. But deep down, you know better. We all do. There's something about being alone at work, after hours, that strips away the illusion of safety. The world feels different when the sun goes down, and the only footsteps echoing in the hallway are your own. I used to laugh at the idea of haunted offices and cursed graveyard shifts. I'd make jokes about the ghost in the break room stealing my lunch, or the shadow in the supply closet that always seemed to move when I wasn't looking. But then I started hearing stories, real stories from people who swore they'd seen things no rational person could explain. Stories that made me question what's really out there, lurking just beyond the edge of the security cameras, waiting for the last light to go out. Tonight, I want to share 3 of those stories with you. Not the kind you find in cheap horror movies or clickbait articles, but true accounts from people who were just doing their jobs until the night their jobs turned on them. Each story is a warning, a puzzle, and a confession, and each one contains secrets that were never meant to be known. The first story comes from a night security guard who thought he'd seen it all until the building itself seemed to turn against him. The second, from a hospital janitor who discovered that some doors should never be opened, no matter how many times you mop the floors. And the third, well, the third story still keeps me up at night. So, if you're listening to this alone, maybe after hours, maybe with the lights low, just remember, you're not as alone as you think. Let's start with a story that happened to a night security guard, one who never believed in ghosts until now. I used to think the scariest thing about working night security was the boredom. You know, the kind that seeps into your bones and makes every minute feel like an hour. I'd clock in at 10 p.m. sharp, badge in, and do my rounds through the same echoing hallways of the old corporate building downtown. The place was all glass and steel, with motivational posters peeling off the walls and a break room that always smelled faintly of burnt popcorn and despair. I'd joke with the day shift guys that the only thing haunting this place was the ghost of missed deadlines. But that was before the night I learned why the 3rd floor is always locked after midnight. My shift started like any other. I did my first walkthrough, flashlight in hand, boots squeaking on the linoleum. The building was a tomb after hours, just the hum of the HVAC and the occasional clatter from the pipes. I checked the doors, make sure the conference rooms were empty, and try not to think about how much of my life I was wasting watching empty hallways on a bank of ancient security monitors. I had my routines. At 11 o'clock, I'd hit the vending machine for a bag of stale pretzels and a can of off-brand cola. At midnight, I'd radio into dispatch, just to prove I hadn't died of boredom. Sometimes I'd talk to myself, just to break the silence. Another thrilling night in paradise, I muttered, biting into a pretzel that tasted like cardboard. Living the dream. The only real excitement came from the rumors. The cleaning crew whispered about the 3rd floor, how the lights would flicker, how sometimes you'd hear footsteps when you knew you were alone. They said the company kept it locked for a reason, that something bad happened there years ago. I always rolled my eyes. People see what they want to see, especially when they're tired and alone. But that night, the building felt different. Heavier somehow, like the air was thicker, pressing in on me. I tried to shake it off, blaming the feeling on too much caffeine and not enough sleep. At 12:37 a.m., the radio crackled. Unit 12, status check. I pressed the button. All clear. Just me and the ghosts. A pause. Then, copy that. Stay safe. I laughed, but it sounded hollow. I glanced at the monitors. The cameras showed the usual empty hallways, dark offices, the red glow of the exit signs. But then, on camera 3, the feed for the 3rd floor, I saw something move. Just a flicker, like a shadow darting across the far end of the hallway. I leaned in, squinting. The 3rd floor was supposed to be locked. No one had access after midnight, not even me. I told myself it was a glitch, maybe a trick of the light. But my heart was pounding. I picked up the phone and dialed my supervisor, Mark. He answered on the 2nd ring, his voice groggy. Yeah. Hey, Mark. You ever see anything weird on the 3rd floor cameras? He grunted. Weird how. Like, movement. Shadows. I thought it was supposed to be empty. He was quiet for a moment. Probably just a glitch. Those cameras are older than you. Don't worry about it. Right? I said, but I didn't believe him. You ever go up there? He snorted. Hell no. That's above my pay grade. Just do your rounds and keep your head down. I hung up, staring at the monitor. The shadow was gone. I told myself it was nothing, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. At 1:15, I did my second walkthrough. The building was colder now, the kind of cold that seeps into your skin. I made my way past the elevators, their doors gleaming in the dim light. The third floor button was taped over, a crude, out-of-order sign hanging crookedly. I paused, listening. For a moment, I thought I heard footsteps above me, slow, deliberate, like someone pacing back and forth. I shook my head. Imagination. That's all it was. I finished my rounds and headed back to the security office. The monitors flickered, static crawling across the screens. I reached for my radio, but before I could speak, the lights in the office flickered and went out, plunging me into darkness. I froze. The only sound was my own breathing, ragged and too loud. Then, the emergency lights kicked in, bathing the room in a sickly red glow. The monitors came back online, one by one. All except camera 3. That screen was black. I stared at it, willing it to come back. After a minute, the feed flickered on. The hallway was empty except for a figure standing at the far end, just out of focus. Tall, thin, dressed in what looked like an old-fashioned suit. I couldn't see his face. He didn't move. He just stood there, staring at the camera. I grabbed the radio. Dispatch, this is Unit 12. I've got a possible intruder on the 3rd floor. Requesting backup. Static. Then, say again, Unit 12. I repeated myself, voice shaking. The figure didn't move. I watched, heart hammering, as the lights in the hallway began to flicker, one by one, moving closer to the camera. The figure stayed perfectly still. Then, the feed cut to static. I sat there, paralyzed. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to get out of the building. But I couldn't leave my post. That's what Mark would say. Don't make a scene. Don't get the company in trouble. I forced myself to stand, grabbing my flashlight. I told myself I'd just check the stairwell, make sure the doors were still locked. That's all. Nothing more. The stairwell was colder than the rest of the building. My breath fogged in the air. I climbed the steps, each one creaking under my weight. When I reached the 3rd floor landing, I saw that the door was ajar, the lock hanging broken. I hesitated, every nerve screaming at me to turn back. But I pushed the door open. The hallway was dark, the only light coming from the exit sign at the far end. The air smelled wrong, like old paper and something metallic. I called out, "Hello? Security. If anyone's up here, you need to leave." No answer. I stepped inside, the door swinging shut behind me with a soft click. I moved down the hallway, flashlight beam trembling. The offices were empty, desks covered in dust. I passed a conference room, its glass walls smeared with handprints. I tried not to look too closely. At the end of the hall, I found a door marked Records. It was open a crack. I pushed it open, heart pounding. Inside, the room was empty except for a single chair facing the wall. On the wall, someone had scrawled words in what looked like red marker. "He sees you." I backed away, stumbling into the hallway. That's when I heard it, a whisper, so soft I almost missed it. "Don't look." I spun around, but no one was there. The lights flickered, and for a split second, I saw the figure from the camera standing at the far end of the hall, face still hidden in shadow. I ran. I don't remember how I made it back to the security office, only that I slammed the door behind me and locked it. I sat there, shaking, until dawn. When the day shift arrived, I tried to tell Mark what happened. He just looked at me, eyes tired. "You're not the first," he said quietly. "Just forget it. It's better that way." I checked the footage from camera 3. The file was there, but when I played it back, all I saw was static except for one frame. A single image of the figure staring straight into the lens. I still have the footage, but I'll never watch it again. If you think that's unsettling, wait until you hear what happened to a late-night cleaner in a hospital basement. People think hospitals are all about hope and healing, but if you've ever worked the night shift, You know better. Hospitals are supposed to save lives. But some nights, I think they collect souls. I've mopped blood off tile floors, scrubbed things I can't even name out of the grout, and learned to ignore the way the building seems to breathe when the sun goes down. I'm not a nurse, not a doctor, just a janitor. But I see things they don't. Or maybe they just pretend not to. I started at St. Agnes Memorial 3 years ago, mostly because it was the only place hiring. The pay was crap, the hours were worse, and the only perk was the free coffee in the break room, if you could call that tar coffee. My first week, an old nurse named Gloria told me, if you hear someone calling your name from the old wing, don't answer. And if you see the lights flicker in the basement, just keep walking. I laughed it off, thinking she was just trying to mess with the new guy. But after a few months, I stopped laughing. The hospital is a maze after midnight. The halls are too bright, too clean, like they're trying to hide something. The only sounds are the hum of the fluorescent lights and the distant beeping of machines. Sometimes, you hear footsteps echoing down empty corridors, or the soft click of a door closing when you know you're the only one on the floor. I used to tell myself it was just the building settling, or maybe a nurse on a late round. But then there were the nights when the air felt thick, like the walls were closing in, and I'd find myself hurrying past the old wing without even realizing it. The old wing is off limits now, condemned, they say, after a fire 10 years ago. But everyone knows that's not the real reason. There are stories about that place. Patients who vanished, nurses who quit without notice, a doctor who locked himself in the morgue and was never seen again. Some of you might remember the red hallway story from last month. This is worse. It was a Tuesday night, the kind that drags on forever. I was halfway through my shift, pushing my cart down to the basement to restock the supply closet. The elevator rattled and groaned like it was about to give up the ghost, and when the doors finally opened, the lights in the basement flickered, just like Gloria warned. I hesitated, but I had a job to do. The basement is the worst part of the hospital. It's where they keep the old records, broken equipment, and the morgue. The air is always cold, and it smells like bleach and something else, something sweet and rotten. I tried not to breathe too deeply as I wheeled my cart down the hall. My radio crackled. "You alive down there, Tony?" It was Lisa, one of the night nurses. She always tried to lighten the mood. "Barely," I said, forcing a laugh. "If I don't make it back, tell my mom I died heroically, fighting off a horde of zombie patients." She snorted. "You wish. Just don't let the basement ghosts get you." Ha. Very funny. I turned the corner and stopped. The lights ahead were flickering, strobing in and out. For a second, I thought I saw a shadow move across the far wall, but when I blinked, it was gone. I told myself it was just my imagination, but my hands were shaking. I started restocking the closet, stacking boxes of gloves and masks, trying to ignore the way the shadows seemed to shift at the edge of my vision. That's when I heard a voice, soft and distant, calling my name. "Tony," I froze. The radio was silent. I looked around, but the hallway was empty. "Tony." It was coming from the direction of the morgue. I should have left. I should have called it in, or just ignored it like Gloria said. But something pulled me forward, like I was sleepwalking. I left my cart and walked down the hall, the lights flickering overhead. The morgue door was slightly open, a sliver of darkness spilling into the hallway. I pushed it open, heart pounding. Inside, the room was freezing. The only light came from a single bulb, swinging gently from the ceiling. The metal drawers gleamed in the half-light, and for a moment, I thought I saw a face reflected in the steel, a pale, hollow-eyed face staring back at me. I blinked, and it was gone. I heard the voice again, closer this time. "Tony, help me." I turned, and that's when I saw the shadow. It was tall, impossibly thin, with arms that seemed to stretch too far. It stood in the corner, just out of reach of the light, its head cocked at an unnatural angle. I couldn't see its face, but I could feel its eyes on me. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over a gurney. My radio crackled to life. "Tony, you okay down there?" I fumbled for the radio, voice shaking. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just thought I heard something." "Don't stay down there too long," Lisa said. "That place gives me the creeps." "Yeah, me too." I backed out of the morgue, never taking my eyes off the corner where the shadow stood. When I finally made it into the hallway, the lights flickered again, and for a split second, I saw the shadow standing at the end of the hall, watching me. I ran. I didn't care if I looked crazy. I grabbed my cart and practically sprinted to the elevator. When the doors finally closed, I slumped against the wall, heart racing. The rest of the night was a blur. I tried to focus on my work, but every time I passed a darkened doorway or heard a strange noise, I jumped. I kept seeing that shadow out of the corner of my eye, always just out of reach. At 3 a.m., I went to the break room for coffee. Gloria was there, reading a battered paperback. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said, not looking up. "Funny," I said, voice flat. "You ever see anything weird in the basement?" She closed her book, eyes serious. "You saw it, didn't you?" I hesitated. "I don't know what I saw." She nodded. "You're not the first. Won't be the last. Just don't go looking for answers. Some things down there don't want to be found." I tried to laugh it off, but her words stuck with me. The next night, I almost called in sick. But I needed the money, so I showed up, telling myself it was just a bad dream. But as soon as I stepped into the building, I felt it, the weight in the air, the sense that something was watching. I avoided the basement as long as I could, but eventually, I had to go down. This time, I brought a flashlight, even though the lights were on. I kept my head down, moving as quickly as I could. But as I passed the old records room, I heard it again, a whisper, so soft I almost missed it. "Tony." I stopped, heart pounding. The door to the records room was open, even though I knew I'd closed it the night before. I stepped inside, shining my flashlight around. The shelves were packed with old files, the air thick with dust. In the far corner, I saw a stack of boxes that hadn't been there before. I moved closer, and that's when I saw it, a file folder, lying open on top of the boxes. My name was written on the tab. I picked it up, hands shaking. Inside were pages and pages of notes about me. My work history, my schedule, even notes about my family. At the bottom, there was a photo of me, taken from behind, walking down the basement hallway. I dropped the folder and backed away. That's when the lights went out. I heard footsteps behind me, slow and deliberate. I turned, shining my flashlight, but the beam flickered and died. In the darkness, I heard the voice again, right next to my ear. "Help me." I ran, crashing into shelves, tripping over boxes. I don't know how I made it out, but when I finally burst into the hallway, the lights flickered back on. The door slammed shut behind me. I didn't go back to the basement after that. I finished my shift on the main floors, avoiding every shadow, every dark corner. When the sun finally came up, I handed in my badge and walked out, never looking back. I quit the next day, but sometimes I still hear those voices when I close my eyes. But the scariest story? That belongs to a gas station clerk who learned some rules are meant to be broken. If you ever work the graveyard shift, remember, the rules are there for a reason. I used to think they were just a joke, a weird initiation ritual for new hires. But after what happened to me, I know better. I broke rule number 4. I wish I hadn't. I started at the Sunoco on Route 17 because I needed the money and didn't mind the hours. Midnight to 8 a.m., 6 nights a week. The pay was barely above minimum wage. But the place was usually dead after midnight. I figured I'd just read, maybe sneak a few snacks, and collect a paycheck. Easy. On my first night, the manager, Dave, handed me a laminated sheet of paper. "Read this," he said, not meeting my eyes. "And follow it. No exceptions." I glanced at the list. It was titled Graveyard Shift Rules. There were 10 of them, each more bizarre than the last. 1. Never leave the front doors unlocked, even for a second. 2. If a customer comes in between 2:13 and 2:17 a.m., don't speak to them. Don't look at them. Just wait until they leave. 3. The payphone outside will ring at 3:33 a.m. Don't answer it. 4. If you see a man in the freezer aisle after 2 a.m., do not look away. Do not blink. Wait until he leaves. 5. If the slushy machine starts making noise, unplug it immediately. 6. If a child asks to use the bathroom, tell them it's out of order. No exceptions. 7. If you hear scratching at the back door, ignore it. 8. If the lights flicker 3 times in a row, hide behind the counter until they stop. 9. Never, Ever go into the storage room after 4 a.m.? 10. If you make it to sunrise, leave immediately. Don't look back. I laughed. Is this for real? Dave's face was pale. Just follow the rules. Trust me. I shrugged it off. I mean, come on, this was a gas station, not a haunted house. But I kept the list in my pocket, just in case. The first few nights were uneventful. A couple of truckers, a drunk college kid or two, the usual. I started to relax, thinking the rules were just a way to mess with the new guy. But then, on my fourth night, things got weird. It was 2:05 a.m. The store was empty, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. I was restocking the candy aisle when I heard the bell above the door jingle. I looked up, expecting a customer, but the store was empty. The door was closed. I felt a chill run down my spine. I checked the clock, 2:13 a.m. My heart skipped a beat. Rule number 2. I stood perfectly still, barely breathing. The air felt heavy, like the whole store was holding its breath. I heard footsteps soft, shuffling moving up and down the aisles. I didn't dare look. I just stared at the floor, counting the seconds. After what felt like an eternity, the footsteps stopped. The bell jingled again. I looked up. The store was empty. I let out a shaky breath and checked the list. Rule number 2. Don't speak. Don't look. Just wait. I'd followed it, and nothing happened. I tried to laugh it off, but my hands were shaking. The next night, the payphone rang at exactly 3:33 a.m. I stared at it through the window, the old rotary phone vibrating on the hook. I didn't answer. After a minute, it stopped. By the end of the week, I was starting to believe the rules were more than just a joke. I started to notice things, shadows that didn't belong, cold spots in the aisles, the way the security cameras would flicker and go static for a few seconds at a time. I told myself it was just my imagination, but I started carrying the rules in my pocket like a talisman. Then came the night I broke rule number 4. It was a slow night. I was reading behind the counter, half asleep, when I heard the freezer door open. I glanced at the clock, 2:21 a.m. I remembered rule number 4 and felt a knot form in my stomach. I stood up and walked to the end of the aisle. There he was, a man standing in front of the freezer, his back to me. He was tall, wearing a dark coat, his hair slicked back. He didn't move, didn't reach for anything. He just stood there, staring into the glass. I remembered the rule: do not look away. Do not blink. Wait until he leaves. I stared at him, my eyes burning. Seconds ticked by. He didn't move. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Reflexively, I glanced down. Just for a second. When I looked up, he was gone. I felt a wave of nausea. The air in the store changed thicker, colder. The lights flickered, then steadied. I tried to shake it off, telling myself he'd just walked away. Well, I wasn't looking. But when I checked the security footage, the camera in the freezer aisle was just static. The rest of the night was a blur. I kept seeing movement out of the corner of my eye, shadows darting between the aisles, shapes that vanished when I turned my head. The slushy machine started making a grinding noise. I unplugged it, just like the rules said. At 4:03 a.m., the phone rang. Not the payphone outside, but the store phone. I hesitated, then picked up. Hello. A voice, low and distorted, whispered. You looked away. I slammed the phone down, heart pounding. I tried to call Dave, but the line was dead. I spent the rest of the shift behind the counter, clutching the rules in my hand. Every time the lights flickered, I ducked down, counting to 10. When the sun finally rose, I grabbed my stuff and ran out the door, not looking back. The next night, Dave was waiting for me. He looked tired, older somehow. You broke a rule, didn't you? He asked. I nodded, too scared to lie. He sighed. You're not the first. Just be careful. The rules are there for a reason. I wanted to quit, but I needed the money. So I came back. But things got worse. The man in the freezer aisle started showing up every night, always at 2:21 a.m. Sometimes he'd turn his head, just a little, like he was listening. The shadows in the aisles grew darker, thicker. I started hearing voices, whispers, and the static of the security monitors, calling my name. One night, a little girl came in, asking to use the bathroom. Her eyes were too big, too dark. I told her it was out of order, and she smiled a wide, unnatural smile and walked out into the night. I started to wonder if the rules were the only thing keeping me safe. I started following them religiously, double-checking every door, unplugging the slushy machine at the first sign of trouble, hiding behind the counter when the lights flickered. But the man in the freezer aisle never left. He just stood there, night after night, waiting. I tried to talk to Dave about it, but he just shook his head. There are other places like this, he said. Other stations, other rules. Some people say it's all connected. I don't know. I just know you have to follow the rules. If you've heard the Midnight Customer story, you'll know what I mean. There are things out there that don't belong in our world. Things that slip through the cracks when no one's watching. My last night on the job, I decided I couldn't take it anymore. I waited until sunrise, then walked out without saying a word. I never went back. But sometimes, late at night, I dream about the store. I see the man in the freezer aisle, staring at me with empty eyes. I hear the phone ringing, the voices whispering my name. I wake up drenched in sweat, heart pounding. If you ever see the man in the freezer aisle, don't look away. And don't say I didn't warn you. 3 stories, 3 warnings. But there's one thing they all have in common. Maybe you felt it too, the sense that you're not alone, even when you should be. The way the air changes when the clock ticks past midnight, or how the shadows in the corner of your eye seem to move just a little too quickly. Maybe you've brushed it off, told yourself it's just your imagination, or the building settling, or the hum of the lights. But after hearing these stories, can you really be sure? 3 people, 3 jobs, 3 warnings. A security guard who saw something watching from the shadows of a locked floor. A janitor who heard voices in the dark and found his own name written in a file that shouldn't exist. A gas station clerk who learned that rules aren't just for keeping order, they're for keeping something out. Different places, different faces, but the same feeling. That the world is thinner at night, and sometimes things slip through. If you've been with this channel for a while, you know these aren't the only stories. Some of you have shared your own encounters in the comments, stories about footsteps in empty hallways, voices on dead-end phone lines, faces in the glass that don't belong to anyone you know. If you have a story, share it below. You never know who's reading. Maybe your experience will help someone else survive their own night shift. And if you're new here, welcome to the community. We trade in secrets, in warnings, in the things that keep us up at night. Hit subscribe if you want to hear more. There are always more stories, some even more disturbing than the ones you've heard tonight. If you remember the red hallway or the midnight customer, you know that sometimes the scariest stories are the ones that never really end. So, next time you're alone at work and the lights flicker, or you hear footsteps where there shouldn't be any, remember, some stories are true, and some are still waiting to be told. Sleep well, if you can.